The elevator doors slid open with that familiar ding, but today it echoed like a warning bell in an empty hall. I stepped out onto the 14th floor of Apex Dynamics headquarters in downtown Chicago. The kind of sleek glass tower that screamed success from the outside, but hid 1,000 little fractures within. My badge scanned green, as always, granting access to the finance wing where the air smelled faintly of printer ink and stale ambition. I settled into my cubicle, fired up my dual monitors, and dove into the morning's wire queue, millions in vendor payments, payroll disbursements, all humming through the system I'd architected piece by meticulous piece over the last 6 years. Then, at exactly 10:15 a.m., my inbox chimed. A single email from Victor Hale, the new VP of Operations. Subject line: Process Optimization Update.
No greeting. No small talk.
Effective immediately. Your approval step has been bypassed for efficiency. Access revoked. Thank you for your service. My screen flickered, and just like that, the dashboard locked me out mid-keystroke. The wire I was verifying, a $7.2 million transfer to a key supplier, froze in limbo. I leaned back in my chair, feeling the weight of the moment settle like fog over Lake Michigan. No panic.
No outburst.
Just a quiet clarity sharpening in my chest. They thought they were trimming fat. They had no idea they'd just severed the spine. I didn't storm out or slam doors. Instead, I methodically gathered my things, the encrypted thumb drive, the leather-bound notebook filled with protocol sketches no one else had ever bothered to read, and my personal laptop. As I walked toward the exit, passing the open-plan desks where colleagues typed away oblivious, I felt the first stirrings of that slow-building pressure, like a storm gathering on the horizon. Victor had arrived 6 months ago, fresh from some Silicon Valley unicorn. All buzzwords and bravado. He'd preached about agile workflows in town halls, flashing slides that reduced complex systems to colorful arrows.
To him,
I was a relic, a senior compliance officer whose manual reviews slowed the machine. But he didn't know the half of it. None of them did. Back when Apex was just a scrappy fintech startup scraping by in a rented warehouse on the outskirts of the city, we'd nearly gone under from a single bad actor. A rogue accountant had tried to siphon off $3.8 million through a ghost vendor scheme. I was the one who caught it, poring over ledgers at 2 a.m., while the founders slept off their investor dinners. That's when I proposed the Safeguard, a layered verification protocol that routed high-value transactions through an independent escrow partner, Keystone Trust. It wasn't flashy, just a cryptographic anchor tied to a dedicated advisory entity. And that entity? Hale and Associates LLC. My own firm, registered quietly during those chaotic early days. Why me? Because no one else wanted the liability. The board signed off. Legal stamped it. And it became the invisible glue holding our financial integrity together. The protocol was simple on the surface. Any transfer over $4 million triggered a hold until Keystone received a matching digital seal from my LLC. It lived outside the company's servers, embedded in binding contracts that emphasized security over speed. I'd written the clauses myself. Late nights fueled by black coffee and the hum of cooling fans. Ensuring the key wasn't tied to a job title or a login, it was bound to the advisory contract. Personal. Irrevocable, without mutual consent. As Apex grew, ballooning to a mid-cap powerhouse with offices in 3 states, people forgot the origins. They saw seamless operations and assumed it was magic, not muscle. Victor, with his optimized org charts, saw my role as a bottleneck he could erase with a policy tweak. He didn't realize that bypassing me didn't just skip a step, it nullified the entire chain. By the time I reached the parking garage, my phone was already buzzing with the first confused texts from the Treasury team. Hey, wires are stuck in queue your end. I didn't reply. Instead, I drove home to my modest apartment in Wrigleyville, the city skyline shrinking in my rearview. That evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the room in amber, I opened my advisory dashboard, not the company's, but mine. With a few clicks, I invoked the revocation clause, advisory services withdrawn pending renegotiation. Effective immediately. Keystone would honor it without question. The funds wouldn't move. Not an inch. And as I set the laptop aside, leaning back into the couch with a glass of wine, I felt the tension coiling tighter. This wasn't sabotage. It was the system protecting itself. Just as I designed. The next morning, the fissures started showing. I pictured the scene back at the office. Frantic refresh clicks. Escalating Slack threads. Victor pacing his corner office with its panoramic view of the river. A $6 million payroll batch hit the wall first, triggering automated alerts to HR. Contractors in California and New York wouldn't get their checks, sparking overdue notices and grumbling emails. Then the vendors piled on, a manufacturing partner in Ohio demanding payment for shipped goods, threatening to halt future deliveries. Apex's supply chain, finely tuned for just-in-time efficiency, began to stutter. I didn't need to be there to know the mood. Confusion morphing into irritation. Then a dawning unease. Victor probably called a huddle, blaming the glitch, ordering IT to debug. But there was no bug. Keystone's response to their inquiry would be polite and firm, hold status per advisory protocol. Awaiting token match. By noon, the CFO, Marlene Voss, would be involved, her sharp New York accent cutting through the excuses. She'd demand explanations. And Victor would fumble, realizing too late that the manual bottleneck he'd removed was the keystone of it all. I spent the day in quiet routine, a walk along the lakefront, the wind whipping off the water like a whisper of vindication. My phone lit up with voicemails, but I let them accumulate, let the pressure build, let them feel the weight of their oversight, the way I'd felt the sting of dismissal. It wasn't about money or ego, it was about respect for the unseen work that kept the empire afloat. As dusk fell, I reviewed the contracts again, tracing the clauses with my finger, solid as steel. And in that stillness, the story's rhythm shifted from the slow unraveling to the gathering storm. By Wednesday, the office must have felt like a pressure cooker on the verge of blowing. I could imagine the boardroom, all mahogany and muted lighting, filled with tense executives huddled over laptops. Marlene would be at the head, her usual poise cracking as she scrolled through the mounting backlog, $12 million installed wires now, including a critical investment drawdown that could tank their quarterly earnings call. Victor, sweating under his tailored shirt, would deflect with talk of interim workarounds, suggesting they reroute through secondary banks or lower thresholds temporarily. But Keystone's contract didn't allow shortcuts. Any deviation would flag as a compliance breach, risking audits from the SEC. The irony burned. In their rush for speed, they'd created a deadlock. Emails from partners escalated, laced with legalese about penalties and breached SLAs. One major client, a logistics firm in Texas, threatened to pull their contract entirely, citing unreliability. Apex's stock dipped 3% in after-hours trading, whispers of operational hiccups rippling through investor forums. And still, no one connected the dots back to me, not fully. They saw a system failure, not a deliberate design choice. That afternoon, my phone rang with a familiar number, Marlene's direct line. I let it go to voicemail. "We need to discuss your transition," she said, her voice tight. "There's an issue with the protocols." Understatement of the year. I didn't call back. Instead, I brewed tea and sat by the window, watching joggers on the path below, their steady rhythm a counterpoint to the chaos unfolding downtown. Flash back to those foundational days, when Apex was bootstrapping in a converted loft space. Dreams bigger than our bank account. The fraud attempt had hit like a gut punch. Nearly $4 million vanished into a shell account before I flagged the anomaly in the reconciliation logs. The founders, two Ivy League dropouts with more charisma than caution,
Panicked.
board meetings turned into all-nighters. Lawyers drafting cease and desists while I sketched the fix. We need an external failsafe, I'd argued, my voice steady amid the frenzy. Keystone Trust was my pick, a reputable escrow firm with ironclad encryption. The token system was my innovation, a unique digital seal generated through my LLC, requiring my explicit confirmation for releases. It added seconds to processes, but saved millions in potential losses. The board loved the liability shield. Tying it to an independent advisor meant Apex wasn't solely accountable. I volunteered Hale and Associates because I believed in the company, back when loyalty flowed both ways. Contracts were signed in a blur of red-eye flights and conference calls, clauses buried in appendices that no one revisited. As we scaled, hiring sprees, acquisitions, a NASDAQ listing, the protocol faded into background noise. Victor's arrival signaled the shift, efficiency audits,
AI-driven approvals.
a culture of move fast and iterate. He saw my reviews as archaic, never grasping they were the anchor preventing drift into disaster.
Now.
As the holds piled up, that anchor was dragging them under. Thursday brought the first cracks in their facade. A leaked internal memo hit my inbox via an anonymous forward, likely from a sympathetic colleague. All hands, temporary treasury delays due to verification upgrades. Expect resolution by end of day.
Lies to buy time.
But vendors weren't buying it. Lawsuits loomed, with one supplier filing a lien on unpaid invoices. Marlene called again, this time leaving a message laced with urgency. We value your expertise. Let's negotiate reinstatement. There it was, the pivot from dismissal to desperation. I responded with a brief email. Advisory revoked per clause 5.2. New terms required. Attached was a draft addendum, outlining enhanced protections, no protocol changes without my veto, a severance package equivalent to 2 years' salary, and equity grants to align incentives.
Bold?
Yes, but fair, given the mess they'd made. The response came swift, a counteroffer watering down the veto to consultation. I declined. Let them stew. That evening, as rain pattered against my window, I felt the damning pressure mounting. Emotions swirling, betrayal's bitter tang mixed with the quiet thrill of leverage. This wasn't just about me. It was a reckoning for every unsung architect propping up empires on their backs. By Friday, the storm was brewing full force. Board members were flying in from coasts. Emergency sessions called. I pictured Victor in the hot seat, fumbling explanations as graphs showed cascading delays, $18 million frozen. Stock down another 4%. Analysts downgrading ratings. Keystone's liaison joined a call, confirming the holds were contractual, not technical. Restore advisory or renegotiate the escrow agreement, they'd advise. But renegotiation meant weeks due diligence, legal reviews, time Apex didn't have. Payroll misses sparked employee murmurs, whispers of layoffs to conserve cash. Marlene's next voicemail cracked with vulnerability. We underestimated your role. Please, let's talk. I scheduled a video call for Monday, giving them the weekend to marinate in the consequences. As I closed my laptop, the tension peaked in my chest, not rage, but a profound sense of justice uncoiling. They'd treated me like a cog. Now they'd learn I was the engine. Monday dawned crisp and unforgiving. The kind of Chicago morning where the wind off the lake cuts through any illusions. I logged into the video call from my home office, Facing a screen full of strained faces, Marlene, Victor, the CEO, Elijah Grant, and a couple of board reps looking like they'd aged a decade in a week. No small talk. Elijah leaned in, his usual commanding baritone softened by fatigue. "We need this fixed. Yesterday." I nodded calmly, my expression a mask of professionalism. "The holds are per protocol. My LLC withdrew advisory to protect integrity after the bypass." Victor shifted uncomfortably, avoiding eye contact. Marlene jumped in. "We're prepared to meet your terms. Full veto on changes. Compensation as requested." I paused, letting the silence stretch, feeling the emotional weight press on them. "And acknowledgement?" Elijah sighed. "We mishandled this. Your system saved us before. We forgot that." It wasn't a full apology, but it sufficed. I uploaded the signed addendum. Within hours, Keystone reinstated the token flow. Wires surged through, $18 million released in a cascade of confirmations. The office exhaled.
But the air had changed.
Victor's optimizations were shelved. Protocols were revisited with reverence. In the weeks that followed, the ripple effects lingered like aftershocks. Employees whispered about the Great Freeze, a cautionary tale shared over coffee breaks. I returned to the office part-time, my role elevated to Chief Compliance Architect, with a corner office and direct board access. Victor's influence waned. He resigned quietly 3 months later, citing new opportunities. But the real shift was subtler. Meetings now included deep dives into legacies. Questions like, "Who built this?" echoing in strategy sessions. I felt the damning emotions release in waves, relief mixed with a quiet power that hummed beneath my skin. This wasn't victory through destruction. It was preservation through consequence. Yet, as I reviewed fresh wires one evening, a nagging doubt surfaced. Had I gone too far? The system protected the company. But at what human cost? The intern who'd idolized the chaos now eyed me with awe-tinged wariness.
Power.
Once invisible, now cast long shadows. The board's annual review brought it all to a head. Elijah presented a slide deck praising the resilient infrastructure, crediting my foresight without naming the incident. But in the Q&A, a new member probed, "How do we prevent dependencies like this?" I spoke up. By valuing the architects, not just the architecture. The room fell quiet, the truth hanging heavy. As I left that meeting, the city lights twinkling below, I pondered the ethics. Was withholding the key manipulation or rightful leverage? The answer blurred in the gray of corporate survival. Months blurred into a new normal. But the undercurrent of that freeze never fully thawed. Apex thrived outwardly, stock rebounded, acquisitions announced, but internally, a cautious hush prevailed. I mentored a small team now, teaching them the intricacies of the protocol, ensuring no single point of failure again. Yet, I kept the core token under Hale and Associates, a safeguard against future oversights. Emotions simmered low, satisfaction and stability, tinged with isolation. Colleagues treated me with deference. But friendships cooled, fear of the woman who could halt the machine. One night, over dinner with an old friend from the early days, she asked, "Was it worth it?" I paused, fork midway. It had to be done. But doubt gnawed. Had my quiet rebellion fostered trust or bred paranoia? A fresh challenge emerged when a rival firm poached talent, whispering about Apex's vulnerabilities. Elijah called me in, eyes pleading. "We need to fortify." I proposed enhancements, multi-factor advisory with redundancies, but insisted on transparency. The implementation dragged. Debates heated as Victor's successors pushed for speed. Tensions dammed anew. Emotions coiling, frustration at repeated lessons unlearned. Then, a breakthrough, The board approved, embedding my veto permanently. Release came in the rollout, the system humming stronger. My role solidified. But the personal toll mounted. Sleepless nights replaying the freeze, questioning if power corrupted subtly. An article in a finance journal caught my eye, anonymous op-ed on hidden gatekeepers, mirroring my story. Was it Victor? The word stung. Empires fall when keys are hoarded. I archived it. The emotional surge peaking, defensiveness giving way to reflection. Perhaps the true Malthuan lay not in the system, but in us, builders and breakers. Forever entangled. Years on, the freeze became legend, a whispered ethic in fintech circles. Apex evolved, but I stepped back, consulting independently. My LLC, a sought-after shield. The city changed too, new towers rose. Old ones faded, but the core question lingered. When does protection become control? In quiet moments, staring at the lake's restless waves, I wondered if I'd locked more than funds that day. The story ends not with triumph, but a haunting echo in a world of invisible powers. Who truly holds the key, and at what price to our humanity?